What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So in just under 2 weeks we have our next sort of rugby tournament on the go, which I'm really looking forward to. The Rugby Championship will be coming back onto our screens. Now, the Rugby Championship, if you've been with the channel long enough, you'll know it's relatively new to me. The first time I caught it was back in 2020. I hadn't actually watched any of the Rugby Championship before starting this channel. I saw it was a totally different area of rugby that never got broadcast to me before, and I started looking into it, and since then it's a tournament I've really started looking forward to on the channel. I started doing more and more coverage on it on the channel. We've moved on recently to do more like the SuperBRU on it last year as well. So with it coming around again, I thought it'd be fun to check out the fixture list of what's going to be happening over the Rugby Championship, as there's some stuff changing this year, as there seems to be every year. I don't know why it changes quite so frequently, but it'll be changing again this year in the format that it's being done. So I thought it'd be fun to check out the fixtures and the order that the games going to be played in, as well as letting you guys know that the SuperBRU for both the Predictor and the Fantasy series will be back up on the channel, because I know so many of you guys really enjoy getting involved with it. So I'll be going over the Rugby Championship stuff first, and then towards the end of the video we'll go over the SuperBRU stuff, how you guys can join in, how it all works, how the point scoring stuff is done, because I know so many of you guys really do enjoy it. So let's jump straight into it then, guys. So what is the Rugby Championship? The Rugby Championship is a little bit of a smaller tournament that goes on in the Southern Hemisphere. It's only between 4 teams: the All Blacks, Australia, the Springboks, and Argentina. They all play in their own little mini tournament. Now, the first year that I actually caught it, because it's changed every year, the format. And I don't know if this is something that if you guys have watched it for longer than myself, you'll know a little bit why this is. But every year since I have watched it, the format has really shifted up quite a lot. So the first year I caught it was in 2020. It was after the World Cup. And South Africa weren't involved in that one, and they called that one the Tri-Nations. That was because of the reason listed down here. I can't say that out loud because you get demonetized on YouTube. Yeah, that is so they only had the 3 teams involved for that Rugby Championship. The next year, everyone was involved, and I don't think I did any coverage of it on the channel. I just sort of caught it in my own time. I think loads of the games are on really early here in the UK as well. It was very hard to get sort of coverage for it, and I just sort of watched that myself. And then last year we really got into it. All 4 teams are in. Each team played 2 games versus each of the other teams, 1 at home and 1 away. There's a point scoring system, sort of like in the Six Nations, and then there was a winner of the Rugby Championship. As you can see, New Zealand have been on the bounce for the last few years. Now, there is something that comes up with the World Cup year. They have a shortened format. Obviously, we have the France World Cup this year, so they'll be on the shortened format again. So I went and had a quick look. The last time they had the shortened format, obviously 4 years ago, South Africa won that one back in 2019. And I just wanted to go and check out what was going on. How does the short format work? But it is identical to the standard format, except for that they play less games. So they now only play each other team once. They still obviously have your win, your draw, your loss, but your bonus points are slightly different in the Rugby Championship compared to like something like the Six Nations. So in terms of the bonus points for those guys, they have the 1 point for losing by 7 or less. We sort of saw that in the Six Nations as well. But their try-scoring bonus is slightly different, apparently, which I don't even think I paid attention to last year. They get 1 point for 3 tries more than your opponent. So in the Six Nations we have, if you score 4 tries, you got a bonus point, whereas in the Southern Hemisphere Championship, there is going to be, you have to score 3 tries more than your opponent. So you can both score 4 and get no points for doing that. You need to score 7 if the other person scores 4. So very interesting in terms of the way the point scoring system works for them. Different way to mix it up a little bit. Checking out the fixture list then, because something that's a bit interesting about the shortened format, maybe one of you guys who's watched it for longer than me can sort of explain how it works. Obviously, because it's a shortened format, they only play each other once. It means that 2 teams get to have 2 home games of the 3, whereas the other 2 teams will have to play 2 away games, which is quite kind of interesting. I'm not sure how fair that is, because I feel like the home advantage, especially in Southern Hemisphere rugby, feels like a really, really big deal. I'm a Wales supporter. I know what it's like watching Wales go over to play in South Africa. South Africa love a good home game, and New Zealand absolutely love it as well. So kicking us off then on the 8th of July, we have South Africa versus Australia. Now, teams have already started being mentioned. I've not been entirely sure about the squad situation. They do these initial squad announcements, but we're like 2 weeks out now. I'm not sure if they condense that team down. I haven't really covered it on any videos or anything, but you can go find the team sheets up that are already being announced on these games. So openers up, South Africa versus Australia should be a really, really interesting game. South African rugby's looking pretty good at the minute. They had, of course, the Stormers getting through to the final in the URC. Australia under new coach Eddie Jones, who are one of the teams I'm really looking forward to see this year and see how they're going to progress towards that World Cup. I've sort of marked Australia as a bit of underdogs for the World Cup. I think they might exceed a few people's expectations, but we'll have to see how they get on this championship. They could go in and lose every game 50 points to 0 and proves what I know about Southern Hemisphere rugby. And then we move on to Argentina versus New Zealand. Argentina playing at home in this opening week. Now, last year, Argentina did actually beat New Zealand in one of the games, but I remember the All Blacks had a big bounce back the following week and just had a really, really dominant game. But Argentina were an absolute threat last year. I think they also beat Australia in one of the games. I think South Africa was the only team that didn't lose to Argentina last year. So that'll be a fun one. They're both on Saturday. These games are also happening at pretty reasonable times in the UK, considering that when I watched the Tri-Nations, I think every game was on at like 2 in the morning. They've actually got some good times here. We've got the first game on at 4:05 on the Saturday, followed by 8:10. So if you got your Saturday afternoon free, you can absolutely check out that one. Week 2, New Zealand versus South Africa and Australia versus Argentina. This might be a bit of a target game for me, this Australia versus Argentina. I want to see how Australia perform in that one. Argentina last year really sort of grew into the year for me. I'm really liking the attack they were doing through the backs. They just were relentless. And the backs had so much speed. They were finding so much room. I remember watching the Argentina-Scotland games. They're a real defence tester because if you just let them go, they'll just keep hammering and hammering. You've got to be able to stop them. Very interested to see how Eddie Jones' defence loads up against Argentina, because we know what he did with England, where he really backed the English defence and actually got them to work on the breakdown situation. And for so many years with England, was actually very happy to give the ball back to the opponents and try and get jackal penalties to actually move yourself up the field or score 3 points. So interested to see what happens with Australia in that game. But this one, a huge one, this one. New Zealand versus South Africa. From my sort of research that's very basic over the last sort of rugby championships, this tends to be the game that decides the winner. It seems to be over the last sort of few years, just where it's come down to in points. There seems to be a really big fixture. This is South Africa's only away game. It's also New Zealand's only home game. So I'm guessing that New Zealand go into that one with a slight advantage in terms of the world rankings. They are right next to each other. I'm sure if you're a South African supporter, you're thinking, that's our game. If you're a New Zealand supporter, you're thinking, that's going to be our game. I think you'll be both kind of biased towards your own teams in that one. That's one that I'm really looking forward to. A little bit earlier here in the UK, 15th of July, 8 in the morning, but I will be certainly up for that one, followed by another morning game of the second game going on at 11:15 in the UK. And then finally, week 3 of 3, we have the Bledisloe Cup, which is between Australia and New Zealand. Now, this is only played like over more than one game, but obviously for the shortened format, there's only one game happening between Australia and New Zealand on the 29th of July, 11:15. But I believe they are also going to be playing a second match in August. I think it's August 4th. It's not tying into the Rugby Championship. It's not going to affect the points of the championship, but it is being like the second Bledisloe Cup match. So it's coming a little bit later, but it's not wrapped up into this tournament, which is quite interesting. But again, another big game, this one. Australia really love a good game against New Zealand. This is a very exciting game normally for me as a neutral to watch. And, you know, Eddie Jones coaching England. We saw that game they had against New Zealand, of course, in that semi-final in the World Cup. He's now in charge of Australia. In terms of the World Cup formats, where these teams might get to if they win or lose, you could be seeing semi-final matches happening across this tournament that could actually be out in the World Cup again. Really looking forward to that one. And then finally ending us off then in the afternoon on the 29th of July, South Africa versus Argentina. So South Africa were the only team not to lose to Argentina last year, so I believe South Africa will go in confident for that one, along with the home advantage. So I would imagine South Africa going in as favourites for that one, but you can never write off Argentina. If they have a clean game and just keep the ball in hand and go through their own attack, they can be a real nuisance to deal with. So there's the fixtures and the times they are going to be on in the UK in case anyone fancies watching them. And then quickly, we will move on to talk about the SuperBRU, because I know so many of you guys really enjoy getting involved with the SuperBRU. So the SuperBRU is back. Of course, it's shortened format, so it's going to be much tighter to actually win. I think we have both got the Predictor and the Fantasy Series live live this year, which is really nice. I was a little bit worried with the shortened format, they might drop the fantasy. There isn't, it is still up. So, starting out, you have the Predictor series, is where on SuperBRU you just sign up. It's all free, it's not sponsored, like everything's free all the way through. It's just the best app I found for so many people wanting to get involved in like a private group. You go in, you log into to SuperBRU, you go on your tournaments, you go new, and you can just join one of the sort of tournaments. And I have a private code, which I'll tell you about in this video. The Predictor series is the one where you look at the games each week. So starting out, we've got South Africa versus Australia, and you basically decide who you think's going to win and by how much. You go in and you can pick the points. I know some people love in the Predictor series, they go all the way down here, they're like, oh, one team to win by 120, go for a Price is Right style win and hope they just happen to be the closest, which is never, I don't think it's ever really panned out, but it is fun to see some people's picks. But you basically pick who you think's going to win. Let's say, for example, I thought that one was going to be South Africa by 8. You pick that one, it would sort of save it in, and you've got to remember to lock it in before each week begins in the first kickoff of the first game. So even though kickoff happens for the first game, you need to have both of them locked in. Because I know last year we had a couple of people missing out on actually locking them in. And basically you get points for the team you picked winning, and you got it correct. You also get points for being within a certain window of them winning. So if I said South Africa to win by 8 and they won by 10, I would get a point for being quite close to it, and if I've beaten everyone else in the pool, I would get a bonus point, and if I was also within sort of 5 points, so you also get an extra little bonus point. So there's lots of points to be held, and there's only over 3 games, so it's going to be super tight. So if you guys want to join in with the Championship Predictor, it's pretty quick, to be fair. It only takes you a few seconds every weekend just to pick your teams who you think's going to win. You log into SuperBRU, you go on your tournaments, you go on to find the Rugby Championship Predictor, and it'll come up with find a group, and the code you want to search for is hoodquiz. I don't know why it's that. That's what SuperBRU does. It's always fun. Or you can also search for Mad Dragon Champ Predictor. It's a lot of words. It's all in caps just to make it easier for you guys to find. And it will have my my little logo in the with a black background. And that's how you find the championship. So that one's a bit of a quick one. If you haven't got a lot of time on your hands to spend looking into it, you can just jump on board with that one. And then the second thing you guys can sign up to is the Rugby Championship Fantasy. Now this is the bigger boy. This is the one I get the most competitive with. This is where you are basically creating a fantasy team out of the teams taking part in the tournament. So like here, you basically go through, you select all your players you want to go into each position, and then based on how they perform in the real world game is how many points you get. You get 5 points for your player scoring a try. You get points depending on how many meters they made, how many tackles they made. You lose points if they concede penalties, if they miss tackles, if they get yellow cards. There's a whole bunch of point systems going on. You can look at the SuperBRU sort of point scoring system to get a more in-depth look. You can have 6 from each team, meaning you could theoretically make a starting 15 out of just 3 teams if you wanted. You could have them out of all 4, but you certainly don't get to just make a team out of the 2 you think will win. You have to pick some players you think might come from the losing team, which makes it fun. You also have a bench. So like here, you have your outside backs. Of course, you'd have your 14 shirt, your 15 shirt, and your 11. But you also have one more. They sit on your bench, and then in between weeks, you can just sort of swap them on and off from the bench. It's sort of free to do. So in the first week, you also have unlimited transfers. You can just add in as many players, take them back out, change your mind as much as you want to before you lock it in. And then in between each round, you will actually get 8 free transfers, which in a starting 15 is a lot. You can change half your team. So it's certainly going to open the doors to a lot of different combinations and stuff. Now, if you're a little bit worried about this, if you're thinking, oh man, this kind of sounds like fun, but I don't know a lot about rugby, or maybe you're like, I know a lot about Northern Hemisphere rugby, I do not know a lot about Southern Hemisphere rugby. This really doesn't matter. I'm not going to lie. Over the course of doing these SuperBRU Championships, one thing we've learned is you can just jump straight in and have a great deal of fun. Now, last year I went back and checked. In terms of the Predictor series, it was extremely close at the end. Rugby 15 just about snuck it. It was actually a joint on point score between Rugby 15 and Ian, who lost it right in the final round, dropped down that one place. And we're only separated by how many points difference happened in real life games, only by 10 across 6 matches. An absolute cutthroat affair. I normally suck at the Predictor series. I'm down there in 12th. I'm terrible at it. I'm never very good at just picking who's going to win. But it's still a really fun thing to get in. It's super quick, and it's a whole bunch of fun. But the real triumph story that happened from last year was at the end of the Fantasy League. This is my captains on the side, by the way, who I'd picked across it. Alex actually won the Fantasy League last year across 6 games, picking captains, picking players and stuff. She eventually did win on 863.5. She got 18 tries from her team, and she did not know a thing about rugby. She just went in and picked names of players that she liked the sound of, and she won. You've got someone who runs a YouTube channel. We had like 38 people competing in it who all know loads about rugby. She said, you know what, I'm going to jump in, I'm going to have a bit of a laugh with it, and she won. So you don't need to be the most hardcore aficionado. Jump in, it's a bit of fun. Pick the players you like the sound of the names of. Pick the teams that you just think might win. Sometimes going for the more outside ones ends up winning. I've seen people score great points by making props captains, and they happen to score like 2 tries in a game. It can absolutely go wild. It's a really fun competition, guys. So jump in. You just need to download an app or go onto the SuperBRU website and sign in. It's just your email and a login and stuff. So once again, I don't actually know if I did all the codes and stuff. So for the Rugby Championship Predictor, where you just pick the teams, the code you want is hoodquiz. And if you want to join in with the fantasy, it's flueiris. I'm gonna scroll in on that one for you guys, because that's a really weird one. That might be one of the weirder ones we've ever seen. Flueiris is what you need for the fantasy one to pick your teams. Jump in. It's a really good laugh. And of course, I do actually cover the results on Monday's video normally. At the end of the weekend, each time the games happen, on the Monday, we'll go over the World Cup ranking updates to see what shifted up due to who won and who lost. And we'll be going over who did well, who scored a good amount of points. We'll go through some people's teams and see who were some good picks over the fantasy as well. So you might even be able to show up in a video yourselves. And if you were involved in either championship last year, I have also set up the SuperBRU to just send you an email. So you might not even have to go through all this. If you were involved last year, it might be a fact of going on an email. You see a request from me, just press accept and you get straight in, and you can already get it. I've already seen a couple of people have actually been doing it even as I've been making the video, because the number of members is going up. But there we have it, guys. That is going to be the Rugby Championship wrapped up in a nutshell, along with the SuperBRU. Make sure you go and sign up. Of course, as we get towards the Rugby Championship, we'll also be doing the preview videos when the teams get announced for each game. I have been tempted to do some videos on the initial squads that have been announced, but I'm not really sure how they're going to shift up and change over the next 2 weeks. Obviously, we've already had squads announced for like the World Cup, and half of Wales has retired since then. So I don't know how much they shift up for the Southern Hemisphere. So we might do some videos leading up to the Rugby Championship. But we'll be doing some coverage of these as they go on. But I hope you've all enjoyed this one today, guys. Make sure you go sign up to SuperBRU, because it is a great bunch of fun. I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.